Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome from beautiful Pasadena, California. I'm looking out the window, and it is, in fact, a lovely day here in Southern California. Wherever you're calling from, the Midwest, the East Coast, Boston, where some of our CTME associates are right now, it might be a little chillier. But as you can see from Todd's background and my live screenshot out the window, it is gorgeous here. And what better way to introduce this Making AI Possible podcast by offering a rosy and sunny picture of Todd's presentation, not really presentation, but Todd's background and the great design and interactive things with AI that we'll go into. If you are new to Making AI Possible, we are a podcast hosted by Caltech Center for Technology and Management Education. That's a mouthful. CTME is an organization on campus that specializes in executive education for both the public and corporations. We really enjoy hosting different companies from around the world to campus within three areas. One is bringing world-class professors and faculty to lecture on state of the art and the cutting edge things that are happening in AI and in the research labs, to bring in to some of the researchers that are building these within the labs. We host groups and tour these labs from robotics to semiconductors and chips to how earthquakes are predicted and the data pipelines around that. And finally, we bring in industry experts from machine learning, data science, systems engineering, and design and interactive art capabilities. So I'm really excited today to introduce just down the street from the California Institute of Technology, Todd Masilko. Todd is the chair of the Interaction Design and associate professor at the ArtCenter College of Design here in Pasadena, California. Todd and I have known each other for quite a bit of time and working in programs together. There's a strong relationship between ArtCenter and Caltech. And I know Todd will kind of get into some of that. But Todd, your background is really fascinating because not only were you at research and development, kind of R&D divisions at Disney within interactive media, but you have continued to teach classes in interaction design. You continue to lead the way in talking about how students are leveraging AI to be more competitive in the workforce, coming out with design and art degrees. I'm probably the last person you want introducing anything revolving around design. So I'm going to hand it over to you for an introduction. Tell us what you're doing at ArtCenter.
Yeah, hi. Great. Thanks, Nick. Maybe I can talk a little bit about ArtCenter first, very briefly.
Please.
We're, I think in some of the creative fields in which our students participate professionally, we're quite well known, but I think even in Pasadena, in the larger society, we're kind of a little bit of a secret. As you mentioned, we are here in Pasadena near Caltech, so we're sort of neighbors across town. ArtCenter College of Design is almost 100 years old. We're very focused on professionally oriented art and design education in creative fields, and has been since the college was founded almost 100 years back. Our graduates go off to pursue careers throughout a wide range of creative fields, whether it's character design for movies or games in Hollywood. We're probably the world's leading source of training for automotive designers. So if you drive a car, there's a good chance it was designed by an Art Center graduate. Industrial design and product design. So your Apple iPad, probably designed by an Art Center graduate. That was my old major. I'm an alum of the school. I was a product design graduate back at a time before interaction design was a field. We do have a fine art program, illustration program, graphic design. So the cool animated title sequence at the beginning of a Hollywood movie might have been made by an Art Center graduate. And then I guess to what I do, I'm the chair of what's called interaction design at Art Center. And I'll throw a couple more terms out. UX design or user interface design would be two terms that you may be familiar with that sort of live under the larger domain of interaction design. The way we talk to our students about it is that anytime there's a new technology that comes along and people need to be able to use it, sometimes in a product, maybe in a surgery robot, maybe the controls for an autonomous car, whatever that might be, where people are engaging with tech, there's usually design decisions that need to be made. And that's kind of where interaction design lives. So our students are, they're making screen layouts and buttons, but they're also prototyping these experiences with coding. And yeah, there's kind of an art component but there's also very much a science and a computer science component to working with digital as a medium. Maybe that's a good starter for the Art Center part of it, I hope.
No, that's perfect. And I think that works very well into the conversations you and I have had recently about AI's role in the creative process. And one question that I see happens a lot within the laboratories at Caltech, specifically around robotics or biomedical devices. How do you have a user interact with the device that has AI embedded in it? But how do
Mhm.
you see AI fitting into the creative process for designers at ArtCenter?
Yeah, it's a big question. And maybe as a lead in, um, maybe a quick comment on just design in general, and then we'll get into because there's actually several
Yeah.
ways there's several. I think there's probably like three areas where I see things happening. But if you think about like just the purview of Art Center, right? Um, design is kind of a little bit of science and engineering and a little bit of art. So if we think about art, let's start with art, maybe fine art. We oftentimes think of it can be very personal, creative personal expression, maybe done for emotional reasons or to express something, and maybe not for a client, maybe no underlying functional need. I'm not saying that to be disparaging, but art can be like a pure creative endeavor, right? And design is some of that. Like there's art in design, but when we talk about design in most of the fields that we teach at Art Center, there's usually functional constraints. So a piece of product design maybe needs to be manufactured. If you're designing a office chair, there's ergonomics and human factors that would need to be taken into consideration, but also manufacturability and cost. So there's stakeholders and there's constraints. And likewise, in interaction design, similar situation. If you're designing a piece of software and the features and functionality perform the task, but they don't make sense to people, right? Then that's a functional constraint that we need to resolve. So design is, but yet at the same time, if you don't have the art in design, there's no joy or soul. So you can't. And so AI. So actually, this is a long way of getting to what I hope to talk more about as we talk today. But like I don't know that AI necessarily in and of itself can have that creative spark per se, but there are lots of things that AI creative tools can do to accelerate and sort of move the creative process forward. And I think it exists differently in a little bit more towards the pure art side of the house versus the more functionally constrained design fields. So maybe one more thing to say before I dig into that is that if you come to a place like Art Center and walk the buildings and talk to faculty or students in different departments of the school, and you said, "Hey, let's talk about AI," you're going to get different reactions from different parts of a place like Art Center because of the fact that a student studying, let's say, illustration or concept art is coming from a very different place, personally, but also professionally as they look ahead towards their career, coming from a very different place than, let's say, an interaction design student who might be looking to design software applications, or an interface for an automobile as their career objective. And so AI tools can be seen as a threat, as something that might be training itself on people's personal artistic expression. Or alternately, if you're an interaction design student looking to build a coded prototype of a piece of software, an AI coding assistant would be probably your best friend because
Yeah.
you no longer have to spend weeks debugging code and pretending to be a front-end developer or a computer science graduate, and you can just rip right through what would have been a very time-consuming part of the creative process. So yeah, it really plays out differently depending on the domain, depending on the
Yeah.
professional domain or the creative domain. So that's one sort of observation at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, and I remember from a talk that you gave on campus maybe a little more than a year ago, and you had talked about how there were gaming developers from the design side who needed to prototype and with very little coding background. But the prototyping language for a lot of gaming is in Unity, which is a rather cumbersome platform or a coding language to learn. Can you talk at all about how students who might not be coders are leveraging AI assisted coding from Cursor or Claude Code to help in that process?
Yeah, this has been was an instantaneous change in our world in interaction design. So again, I'll touch on maybe the image making components after we talk about coding.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so I was kind of refreshing my memory before the talk. So ChatGPT, right, is almost exactly 3 years ago. ChatGPT launched, and like almost to the day, I think. And
November 30th,
yeah,
2022,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and one of the case studies that I've shared in some of the Caltech talks, which we still use 3 years later, because it still is so evocative of
And that's
how.
funny how 3 years with Gen AI feels like a complete lifetime. Like some of the things that we were trying to do in industry 3 years ago with Gen AI, we thought we'll never be able to do now. And look where we are now.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. So like I remember almost to the day, right, when ChatGPT hit, and our students used it immediately. They were probably some, and this is before you know, Copilot was widely, known and branded
Right.
as a developer tool or some or Replit or Claude Code. But the LLM kind of chat interfaces coding assistant was actually something that art and design students who have been trying to make, coded software prototypes just like naturally found. And the engagement with it was also fairly natural. So to your point, in the world of interaction design, one of the never-ending constants is the change of the software tools that we use. Like the tech progresses, but also our tool sets progress. Uh, Design principles tend to stay quite constant, but the tools that we use change. And so that's a real challenge for prototyping for young designers in design school. And when I say prototyping, I'm talking about again, let's just take an example that we're making, maybe to use a simple example, an application or piece of software for a phone app, or maybe a prototype of the software interface for something like an electric vehicle. So a screen in the middle of the car, and you want to prototype and be able to utilize some of the functionality to experience what it would be like to drive that vehicle. And so, obviously, coding, whether it would be with something like Swift or if it was a web interface, HTML, CSS, whatever the medium might be, in order to truly engage with the prototypes, you need to do some degree of coding to bring that closer to life. And I would say one of the constants in design education for as long as I've been around is that your average art and design student isn't as natural of a coder as let's say, a comp sci student at a place like Caltech. Some of our students are, but it's a minority of them, right? And they come to art and design school for other reasons and to pursue other interests, but are enthusiastic about technology and interested in learning, but it's not where they spend most of their time. Um, and this is really important in terms of leveraging AI tool sets. We've always stressed um, in the first few terms of our curriculum, understanding, for example, how HTML is works and is constructed, and basic syntax and basic structure, and how software is often architected in the same way that we might teach foundational principles of color theory, composition, and form. So our students at a place like ArtCenter do more or less know how an app is architected and more or less know what tools are widely used in industry and what they're capable of. And so if you have that knowledge, and I stress if, and you have clear design intent, also very important, our students were able to go to ChatGPT like literally a day or two after it came
Mm.
out and say, "Hey, I'm having trouble getting this C# code in Unity to work, um, needing then to articulate exactly what it is that they're trying to get to work, both the features and functionality, but also the structure or the aspects of Unity that they're trying to engage with. So you need to be able to articulate your intent. But once you're able to do that, it was amazing. We had prototypes working in 3D environments with simulation. That we would have in an entire art center 14-week long term. We would have
Mm.
never had more than, if we were lucky, one student building a working prototype like that. And we can have a class, standing up fairly functional prototypes in a week or two now. So this is a complete game changer, and it's made prototyping with code as a medium, and it's made tools like game engines like Unity and Unreal, which were really, really, really steep learning curves for artists and designers. I would say much more accessible than they've ever been. So it's really changed the way we work in the program.
So, as these skill sets that students are learning are changing, using generative AI capabilities to be able to streamline coding tasks that would take a semester long, and now you're talking about maybe an evening or a couple days to reach a prototype. How has the toolkit changed for students hitting the job market? Essentially, how do you thrive in a job market where these AI tools are now part of an everyday work?
Yeah, a couple of ways that it's played out. For our graduates, I mean, I would actually say that a significant percentage of graduates from our program in the last 3, 4 years have ended up working on teams that are developing creative tools powered by AI. So we have an alum working on the Copilot team, for example, as an
Mm,
interaction designer. We have another recent graduate working on surgical robots at Johnson and Johnson on the human machine interaction
mm,
component that a surgeon would use to run a surgery robot. So these are, again, career pathways that wouldn't have existed in the past. So some things are taken away by the new onset of creative tools. There are definitely entry-level user interface design jobs that aren't needed anymore because there's smaller teams can do more. But we do see an awful lot of new roles opening up and new paths opening up. And I guess the other thing that I feel like is becoming clear is that in order for a, a graduate of our program or a young professional in design to really maximize those opportunities, there are kind of low tech, very traditional skills that have always been important, but they're more important than ever. So like we have always stressed at Art Center foundational art and design principles. So again, as I mentioned earlier, understanding um, basics of form, being able to articulate and describe the form that you may be trying to make, being able to verbally or in writing articulate, for example, if you're noticing a usability challenge with a prototype, being able to articulate that and explain how it is you would like to improve it with clear and concise language.
mm.
So, verbal and written communication skills and a very high sort of literacy and grounding in foundational design principles. Um, I think without that, you can't, as a creative, maximize your ability to, achieve uh, the creative output that you're looking for with really any AI powered tool. So the better you're able to understand and articulate your intent, the better one would be able to then achieve a desired intent with an AI powered tool, whether that's a generative image making tool or whether that's
Hmm.
an AI coding assistant or whether that's integrating, let's say, a machine learning plugin into something like Unity in order to simulate an experience. But in all instances, that literacy in foundational skills and clear ability to communicate, to have intent, but also to convey that intent. We see it as really, frankly, more important than ever.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is a lot of the hard skills are kind of being equalized and put on the same plane, and soft skills are being elevated to
Mhm.
differentiate candidates on the market. What are those specific soft skills that Art Center students are now that you're seeing on the market that are required of students? And this could be for a computer science student coming out of Caltech. This could be for, a student coming from Pasadena Community College going to the market with their associates. What does that soft skill look like?
Yeah, well, and again, I think with almost all of these soft skills, they're things that we've talked about for as long as I've been in the field, but and not that they weren't important before, but it just feels like it's been dialed up. So, ability to collaborate. So I mentioned communication skills. I think that's extremely important. But yeah, the ability to collaborate with teammates. So yeah, collaborative skills, consensus building, communication skills. I think all of these things are really important. Let me digress just a little bit.
Yeah,
So we're
please.
talking about going into the career field, but in my role as department chair too, I also work with our faculty to look at incoming portfolios of applicants. So a
Mm,
place like Art Center, Art and Design School, right? Of course, we do look at grades and GPAs and things like that. But the most important component of an applicant to an art and design school is what's called their portfolio. So it's a body of creative work. And if one is applying to an interaction design program like ours, there would be, for example, probably some mock-ups of maybe an idea for an app and a prototype, or maybe some interactive physical computing and prototyping that you may have done that might be documented with slides and videos, or it might be documented with a click-through prototype. But so where I was going was, I think what we see when when we look for the combination of hard and soft skills that you're alluding to for a career trajectory, we're also having to reassess what we're asking and what we're looking for when we review portfolios from incoming students because of the fact that AI coding assistants, generative image making
mm,
tools, creative tools for software prototyping like Figma, which have component libraries which are so easy to look up and reuse. The fidelity, what we call the fidelity of a prototype, what we would call a high fidelity prototype, something that at first glance looks like a really finished piece of software, like my middle school age kids can make those now. But when you start poking at it, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that that prototype is particularly well thought through or would end up being easy to use and intuitive or enjoyable to use. So in a way, like it used to be hard to make the high fidelity prototype. So like seeing that in a portfolio would be a signifier that a lot of work has gone into it. You could infer that a lot of work
mm,
has been, but you can't infer that anymore. So in a way, unless we ask an applicant to demonstrate more of those soft skills along with showing the work, it puts actually more of a burden on the person doing the reviewing, if that makes sense. So yeah, we ask for more, maybe make a short video and describe your creative process, document the iterations that you went through, the different variations of the design as it progressed. We ask for that more explicitly, and we ask for more personal observations and insights about what was learned along the way at each iteration. And that actually surfaces. It makes it easier to kind of look inside the designer's mind and understand their process and kind of understand them a bit more as a person rather than only looking at the work. So I feel like the way that we've been assessing like incoming student portfolios is almost perfectly aligned with what we hear like from industry as they interview graduates coming out of college. Like we need to see more of those same things,
yeah. And
from
Todd, that's
them.
that's
Yeah.
not too dissimilar from when we're hiring on data science teams that I've worked on, or machine learning, or we call it AI engineering now. It was very similar. It's like you have the take home assignment. You're given a week to do it. You come back, you show the Jupyter notebook or your code, and you put a little slide deck.
Yep.
But it was very difficult to do those take home assignments if before what November 30th, 2022. Now, people can prototype very quickly, and a lot of the impetus is put on, okay, what's your slide deck look like? How are you going to present this to a client? How are you going to go about showing the creative process? How do you answer questions? How do you
Yep.
deal with difficult questions? So this kind of gets us to, I think we're seeing this happen on your side, on the art side, and our side on the data side, for what does the interview process look like, be it applying to Art Center or applying to an institute or applying to jobs. So this is a perfect segue to this emphasis on process.
Yeah.
You're talking about teaching students to be able to articulate their design processes, to document how they went about creating their final application. It could be using generative AI, or it could be using nothing with AI. But how do you teach that as part of the curriculum?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I another anecdote to share is that we had about a year-long process here at Art Center across the department chairs and faculty councils and things like that about like, are we going to have a policy? What's our policy on
I'm
AI?
assuming it was a lot of meetings.
A lot of meetings and a lot of discussion, and I don't want to say that there's 100% consensus, but there's definitely much more of a consensus and the beginnings of a policy, and and a big part of that is rooted in well, a couple of principles, and one of them is sort of a transparency, and that's process documentation, really. Like if we're using it, talk about it, the how, the why, the what you learned, the what you noticed um, in class with, when presenting the work. Um, uh, so that's one of the things that I think that came out of that process, and because we noticed that when policies were a little bit more ambiguous. So faculty, for example, do need to make an AI declaration in syllabi at Art Center. Now you can't there
Mm-hmm.
are classes in which a faculty member can say no use of generative AI. This is a class about, hand lettering or figure drawing. We're just not using it. We don't do that. It's not what the class is about. But we also have courses where faculty can make a clear statement that actually this class is very much about actively engaging with artificial intelligence as a medium. So, for example, there was a sponsored studio class sponsored by the packaging design team at Google and the graphic design program here at Art Center. And the students were training models on data sets that they were building and then building prototypes to see how well they could generate output, 2D and 3D output that followed very specific visual and form
Mm-hmm.
languages. Fascinating. So that would be like active engagement. But in any case, we've come very firmly down on the side of the fact that as a creative, faculty member or student, basically, if you sign your name on the work, it's you. And
Yeah.
so if you worked with AI, whether that would be an Adobe product or Midjourney for imagery or Copilot or Replit for coding or whatever it may be, you need to cite it, and you need to
Mm-hmm.
you need to acknowledge that it's not a problem. At the end of the day, you're still the one signing off on that work because you
Yeah.
probably used AI to generate a whole bunch of options. And as a human, as an artist or a designer, you still made a choice. And you still made a choice that that's the finished work that you're going to put out there in the world. So, like, creator is still the author, so there's still a human in the loop. And we're going to be very open and transparent about talking through the process all the way through. So I think those are principles that we're trying to kind of uphold across the
Yeah.
college.
And I'm sure it's getting harder to be able to separate what is generative AI content versus what isn't. And we see,
Mhm.
from consultancies like Deloitte in Australia who have been slapped with, um, penalties for Gen AI content that's not grounded in reality for some of the cases that they're citing, all the way to AI slop that you see online. And the one of the phrases, I forgot who said this, but is this is the worst it's going to be in terms of AI generated content. And for some that's really exciting, for some that's really stressful. But each day or each model release, which really does feel like each day at this point, Gemini 3 was what, a week or so ago, and we had different, we had a new Opus model drop last week, and so being able to tell the difference between AI content and not, I'm sure for those who are looking at portfolios for students coming in, or those who are putting finalized work products into the art community, it's getting more difficult to be able to tell the difference. And so being able to assign your name to something that you have stated, here is the lineage of how this was created, all the way from code artifacts to art artifacts to even legal corpuses that you might be doing in law. Um, so
Mhm.
I'm not really sure where that long statement was going, but it was more in agreement agreement to what you had said. But it's reassuring to know that you are instructing students to be able to showcase that lineage of where that generative AI content came from.
Yeah, and I mean we feel, I mean obviously ethically there are reasons to be doing this, but to be honest, it really is a professional asset for a student coming out of design school to be able to demonstrate a fluency with a wide range of tools, awareness of strengths, but also in some cases shortcomings of those
Um,
tools, demonstrate professional judgment, and the ability to clearly convey and communicate that to a team. I mean, I don't see a downside, either ethically or from a professional skill building standpoint, to just being very forthright about about the pros, cons, and learnings from engaging with a
yeah.
wide range of AI powered tools. And sometimes if the answer is no for this particular project, we shouldn't use it, and here's why. And in other cases, you know what, we can really generate a lot more iterations. That gives us more options to review. It's still going to be a person making the final, or a
Hmm.
team making the final call, but let's try it because we can evaluate more options faster. But yeah, I think just engaging openly is a healthier policy um, than not.
Well, perfect. If you are listening and you'd like to ask Todd a question, please put it into the chat thread, and I'll weave it into this conversation. Todd, so kind of some digging a little more into the future of creative roles. So we talked about how design education is evolving. We've talked about what does it look like for students who are joining the job market. What does it look like for the future of creative roles? Kind of giving a nod to your time at Disney R&D labs or other industry related firms. What are some of the long-term jobs that you see being boosted by AI, and what are the long-term jobs that are seeing at a risk of being replaced from AI?
Yeah, maybe maybe the risks first. I would say the most existential concerns lie in a couple of spots. So anything entry level. I mean, it's pretty much any discipline at the college, right? There's some concern about what's happening to entry level jobs. So in interaction design, specifically web design, application design, um, the initial prototyping of an interface might involve a lot of what we call like wireframes and user flows and things like this, which is basically sketching out all the screens and all the interactions. And you used to have quite a few fairly junior level or entry level designers to do that. And now you don't. And so that's a type of job that it's not that it's gone, but you're going to have, a quarter of the number of people on the team using AI tools to generate probably more iterations than 4 or 5 times as many people could have done the old way. But that does mean less opportunity potentially for those entry level pathways where young artists and designers would go. They would spend a few years kind of learning the trade, learning how to work on it in an office with a team. You do actually absorb an awful lot of knowledge just being around people doing grunt work sometimes, and that kind of goes away a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and then I would say on the more visual design component, let's just take, for example, what we would call concept design for the entertainment industry. Maybe a example would be if you're familiar with like the concept art from old, classic sci-fi movies like Star
Hmm.
Wars or something like there would be, half a dozen people in a studio rendering and sketching all kinds of creatures and characters and spaceships and things like that. And it would take a team of people, a lot of cycles, a lot of sketches. Now with Midjourney or Stable Diffusion and a couple of people on the team, you can generate an awfully high volume of pretty interesting looking stuff.
Hmm.
And so there's also a fear that the kind of entry level position for something like a concept designer or an illustrator or a storyboard artist, for example, that there's real peril there. I think the kind of art and creative direction side, um, that's a whole different ball game, right? Because a highly skilled, highly knowledgeable creative professional making the decisions on what is the right design for the spaceship, or what should the alien look like, or how is the composition in these storyboards we're going to use for this, advertising commercial scene? Or let's look at these wireframes and user flows for the app prototype. These are the two that we'd like to user test.
Yeah.
These places that require a combination of professional knowledge and creative judgment, that's not going away, and humans are still needed for that. And those jobs, in some ways, are more valuable than ever. And I think numerically, there probably are more of them, at least in interaction design, because there's more kinds of digital interaction happening with AI tools and robots and things like that. So yeah, the kind of mid to high end, I guess it's the kind of separation of the entry level and at the high end. We see loads of opportunity at the mid to high end creative direction component of things, and maybe some peril at the entry level side of things.
Yeah. We had a guest a few months ago from Caltech, an astrophysicist, Professor Konstantin Beaudoin, and he's a formidable rock star in his side life as a performing musician and guitarist and vocalist. He stated in our conversation about Gen AI and music that it's really easy for Gen AI to essentially recreate music in the image and tone of Beethoven or Mozart, but it's not going to give you the next Mozart. It's not going to give you the next Beethoven. Do you see a similar comparable within the art area?
Yeah, 100%. And this is something that this is one area where I do feel there's a consensus emerging across maybe between music and art and design, but I think also across kind of art and design in general that we didn't see a couple of years back. Yeah, absolutely. Any kind of AI model trained on any kind of an existing data set. Um, I suppose, you can ask it to do something new that's never been done, but it's still doing something that's never been done that's based on a bunch of stuff that's been done. And with art and design, um, we it's easy to forget with all the tech and tools that we use that it's still like a very human and emotional thing, right?
Mm,
Like whether it's music or whether maybe it's a new app designed for the next Apple laptop or something like that. If it's just a little off, people notice. It's like, this isn't quite right for the Mac. Why did they do this? Why did they do this to the icons? And how come the corners, edges aren't quite right? The radius is a little off.
yeah.
And, customers that may not be trained in art and design, they kind of know that it's not right. It's not quite right. And so there is like a very, primal, emotional. This is the art part of design, right?
Yeah, it's
That's
like,
still in there.
I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
what I'm looking for. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I know when it's off.
Yeah, that's right. And that's very much a part of it. That's why I look, I mean, the speed of technological progress, of course, I suppose we can get closer to probably original ideas, original work. I mean, there's a trajectory, but I still feel like I don't think we're anywhere near um, truly original flashes of inspiration coming purely from a computer. And even if they could, from AI, even if they could, I still think if it could generate 1,000 of those, you'd want to have people, picking the ones that you want to put
Yeah.
out there in the world, right? So there's still like a curatorial component where human insight, intuition, and judgment lives. And in the design and artistic world, I don't think that that's going away. But yeah, I do think in some fields those jobs will become fewer in number,
Hmm.
but interestingly enough, like kind of higher skilled and maybe higher paid. But because of the unique mixture of hard and soft skills that
Yeah.
one need to exhibit to be effective in the role. But I don't like we're not worried about interaction designers not having career possibilities with the onset of AI, to be frank with you. The industry is shifting, the roles are shifting. We know that we need to be extremely nimble and keep up with change as best we can. But we're not really afraid that the jobs are going to disappear for our graduates. In the same way, look, like the spreadsheet came out and accountants weren't put out of
I
work,
love that
right?
example. I
Right?
heard that example for the first time yesterday. I was like, that is the example I was looking for.
The whole industry, the whole finance industry
Yeah.
changed, right? It
Yeah.
just changed and the jobs changed, but it's not as if like Excel comes out and it's like, oh no, we won't need anybody doing taxes or actuarial tables, or you can fire the team at the insurance company. Like the industry just adjusted and used the tools and came out with
Yeah.
new ways of financial modeling and things like that that they weren't able to do before. So I do think that in a field like interaction design, that's more of the more of a parallel situation.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions, and I won't say specifically who asked it, but they asked about AI in marketing, and I'll
Mhm.
kind of riff on this a little bit. Is near and dear to interaction design is how do you help market products? You talked about cars. I'm thinking kind of like maybe Campbell's soup or something like that. Where are the different areas that you're seeing generative AI or AI writ large impacting marketing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, marketing is I mean, interaction design graduates oftentimes do work in marketing and marketing adjacent fields. I would say in our field, the component of the professional landscape that's most parallel to that would be in the kind of UX and software design,
Mm,
the kind of what's the term? The data analytics and user testing component. And yeah, I mean, I assume that that's an area where AI tools and analytics are being used extensively in marketing. That's not my expertise per se, but I would say that the parallel to that in interaction design, user experience, user interface design, is that in the same way that I think with creative visual design, we see the ability to leverage AI to iterate more, more options to analyze and maybe some degree of analysis, but then still human judgment and intuition to make the final call. I would say with analyzing, for example, the usability of software, we can parse that data faster. But if we're looking to maybe make another change or move on to what we think the next feature or iteration should be, there's still that need for a person. So I assume that there's a parallel in marketing, but it's not my area of expertise, to be honest
yeah.
with you.
Well, as we, move kind of towards the end of this segment, what are some parting thoughts that you have for somebody who might be deep in a career of study on art and interaction design or UI, UX capabilities, or even for those computer science graduates who are graduating soon and needing to hit the job market?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a parting thought, but I want to share a story, maybe, which
Yeah,
kind
please do.
of, I mean, one of the parting thoughts is like, don't run and hide from AI. I mean, embrace it, but with open eyes, be aware of the pitfalls. There's lots of them. But I was researching the origin of a quote that actually one of my colleagues 25 years ago at R&D used to talk about this quote about advanced technologies being like magic. And I looked it up, and I think it was like Arthur C. Clarke. You probably know this one. And like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from
Yep.
magic. And there's a bunch of permutations of that you hear in the design field. And the reason I mention that, because AI is kind of like magic sometimes, but we at Art Center, like, we're very proud of the fact that like it's been like 8 years ago, way before ChatGPT, we launched our first AI related design class called AI and Agents. And at the time, it was like early days of IBM Watson as a widespread
Yeah,
commercial product, right?
that was
And
during the Jeopardy run, right?
yeah, yeah, when Watson was on Jeopardy, right? And
Right.
and also there were all kinds of like webcam plugins for you can infer the emotions of your
Yeah,
users, if they're
yeah.
angry or they're frustrated. And so our students, again, are very, very diligent Art Center students that will spend hours, on the button layout of a single screen or the steps in a flow. And then all of a sudden they'd be like, well, then there's this AI thing that just reads people's emotions. And we'd be like, are you sure? This is like they were treating it like magic. They were reading the
Yeah.
articles, seeing the videos online, and then being very, very hands-on and engaged with every aspect of the interaction design process up until the moment that AI came into the picture, at which point they accepted that it just worked like magic. And my boss at the time, Maggie here at the program at ArtCenter and myself and
Yeah.
our faculty colleagues, we had these long conversations about that. We're like, we cannot let this be. Like our students learn from engaging with the medium. Like we make stuff, we learn from making, whether that's a physical object in the shop or a coded prototype.
Mm.
They have to use AI tools in as hands-on,
Yeah.
metaphorically as possible in order to understand, to truly understand um, not only the possibilities and the potentials, but also the pitfalls, the shortcomings, the areas where error can occur, ethical
Mhm.
concerns, if we really need to watch for those. Like we have to engage. So I think I do think that continues to be an approach that I very much believe in. Like even if you're not wanting to go down that route as a career pathway or have deep ethical concerns about AI in the creative domain, I would still encourage you to engage with it to get
Mm.
something closer to a hands-on understanding of both the possibilities and the pitfalls of that technology. It's going to make you a more informed creative.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect summary of kind of the conversation you've laid out today. Well, if people are local to Pasadena or locally minded, how are they able to access Art Center? Is it an open institute? Having gone there multiple times, it is an absolutely gorgeous campus on the hillside, which is the picture from behind you, and then also what I just referred to as the wind tunnel campus.
Mhm.
And I'd love if you could expunge on that statement a little bit about the two campuses that you have.
Yeah, sure. So you can visit our campuses. Yes, we have a beautiful uh, mid 1970s era, modern, beautiful campus on the hills above the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, which is our original Pasadena campus location. There's a gallery, and there are tours available of the campus if you're interested in potentially being a student here. Um, the second location, our South Campus, is near the end of the 110 freeway in Pasadena, just a couple of miles from Caltech. And the wind tunnel building you refer to has a Caltech connection because it was the first built originally as the first wind tunnel for supersonic jet engine aircraft testing, built by Caltech and a consortium of aerospace companies. Long story short, Art Center bought it in the early 2000s, and the interaction design program. We have many of our classes in that wind tunnel building. It's also where we run the college's really well-known transportation design program, and there's a small gallery there as well. We hold events on campus fairly frequently, so you can keep an eye on that. So yeah, we would love people to come check out Art Center. The other thing, though, if I may make a shameless plug,
Please do, yeah.
we have what's called the Art Center graduation show in fall and spring at the Pasadena Convention Center. And every graduating student at Art Center, every term that we have graduating students, puts their work on display just for a few days, but in a public show at the Pasadena Convention Center. And if you really want to see the complete breadth of what's going on across Art Center, this is the absolutely the best way to do it. The next one of those, free to the public, will be, I believe, is it Saturday, December 20th? And we have another one in April for our spring graduation. So keep an eye on
Oh,
the Art Center
fantastic.
website and kind of keep an eye if you're ever interested in checking out the graduation show at the Pasadena Convention Center. It's the whole spectrum of work, and students will be there and faculty will be there. And it's a really great place. If this whole art and design thing is a little bit mysterious, come check it out. It's a fascinating field. Really, really great opportunities for young creatives at this moment of, rapid technological change.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And, the plug from CTME, we have a new course that is dropping right now is AI for project managers. So if you are a project manager, even if you don't have a PMP certification, we have a 2 to 3 day course that lays out how to use AI for RACI matrices, proper team allocation and optimization, all open source, no coding platforms that you can use like Microsoft Copilot and ChatGPT for that. I said open source. That's not open source. I had to catch myself there. And then we have a whole slew of different AI engineering specific courses for both the public and both organizations, including AI for executives and AI for managers. Wherever you are on the continuum and hierarchy of your organization, we have a course for that. Todd, thank you so much for joining us on this gorgeous. It's Friday, right? I'm just going to assume it's Friday. That's the state of mind I'm in. Well,
Yeah,
thank you
thank you
very
for
much.
having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. Take care. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.